This is episode 34 with Jules Schroeder.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 34 today, and I'm really excited to be welcoming Jules Schroeder to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast. Now, Jules is an entrepreneur, speaker, writer, marketing consultant, musician, podcast host, and an expert on millennials who helps people along their unconventional paths and teaches them how to profit from their passions. At 27 years old, Jules is creating a movement to empower young adults to choose themselves by learning strategies from some of the world's top experts. Jules launched her first six-figure company at the age of just 18 and then a seven-figure company when she was 22. But then after one of her partners went behind her back, she lost it all. Apart from being a badass businesswoman, Jules is also a singer, a speaker, and an adventure enthusiast. After spending some time together in this interview, she quickly became one of my new favorite people. Now, in this interview, you're going to learn how Jules started a six-figure business at 18, a seven-figure business at 22, and then lost it all. Why your unsexy job is a blessing in disguise, how to attract high-level opportunities and contacts, Jules' game to get context and figure out what you want in life, some unconventional ways people are making a living, and the key to finding sustainable success. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/034. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's go hang out with Jules. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm speaking to Jules Schroeder. Jules, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thanks so much, Brian, for having me on the show. Hey, guys.
Yeah, no, Jules, I'm really excited to have you on here because you obviously work with 20-somethings and quarter lifers yourself, and you've been through quite an awesome journey in your 20s. So for people listening, I wonder if you could just talk us through what your quarter life journey looked like. Or or looks like.
Yeah, well, I'm 27, and the whole quarter life theme really hit home. I think I was a few months before my 25th birthday, and literally my whole world felt like it was crashing down. I was just like, what's going on? I'm not having the success that I thought I would have. Like everything felt like it was up in the air. And to go back in time a little bit, some of my background, I started my first six-figure company at 18, first seven-figure company at 22. Took anyone that's listening that knows about girls with feathers in their hair. It was a whole little trend. I don't know if it made it to your side of the world, but that was my first internet business. And started that out of Boulder and did wholesale, and it blew up. And from there, I got into Amazon book publishing in 2012. Me and two co-founders figured out how to make books bestsellers on Amazon. And we took the algorithm, turned it into an online course, did a seven-figure launch, and then started a publishing company for people like Dave Asprey from The Bulletproof Executive and Mind Valley and a bunch of other people. And so there I was. This was like 2014. It was December of 2014. And at this time, I was skiing 26 mountains in 4 different countries in 30 days with my boyfriend and also one of my business partners, top of the world, who's in France. And 2 weeks later, I got back and found out my other business partner had been embezzling a bunch of money. And overnight, we went into $200,000 for the debt. And this was the timing of, this was, like I said, in January, and this was of 2014, which was just a few months before my 25th birthday. So I can get into more of the details of that story, but it literally, the concept of quarter life crisis really hit home. And, I spent the better part of several months ending the relationship with my other boyfriend, trying to like consciously untangle all the business stuff, paying back clients, dealing with lawyers, the IRS. And through the better part of that 9 months, went through a process of basically losing everything that I thought was important to me at that time. Nice. And everything from like savings to money to status to all that. So
you basically lost like all your money from those successful businesses, or that successful
yeah.
business. And
Yeah,
I actually,
totally.
and I actually like, I say this, please don't take this the wrong way, but I actually love this because obviously I do some research on my guests beforehand, and like on your website and stuff, which I'll link up in the show notes, you can see like all the things you've done, like starting a business really young, but it doesn't mention that part, and you still somehow find yourself today like doing really, really meaningful work, and you've it is a comeback. So I really love that as well. But what I want to go back to, you started a 6-figure business at the age of 18. And I know when I was at the age of 18, I was not thinking about starting my business at all. How did you get into business at such a young age, and especially such a successful business?
Yeah, so I think it dates back to the relationship I had with my dad. My dad worked Wall Street in New York City. I grew up in a little suburban town outside of Connecticut in the States. And he, would always come home and treat the house like it was the boardroom. I was the oldest of 5 girls. He'd leave really early in the morning and come back super late at night. And one of the things he always did, no matter if I was just asking him to go out with my friends or, I had something I wanted to propose to him, he would find the holes in every plan in under 10 seconds. And it was so frustrating because I would think I'd have the best ideas, and then literally he would like shred them apart. And so at the time, it was rather annoying. But what it did do is it developed this mindset in me of really being able to see and think differently, where I'm able to look at a picture and basically see what's missing, thanks, Dad, very quickly, and then create these fun different opportunities and strategies to kind of fill in the gaps. And so there I was, 18, my first year in university in Colorado, and I was in an economics class, and a clipboard got passed around. And it was like, hey, do you want to earn a bunch of money this summer? And I was like, all right. So wrote my name down on the clipboard. Turned out it was actually an internship teaching you how to run your own business. And they gave you all the skills and taught you all the things you need to know. And then you would run your own house painting business. So what I did is I literally would go out in the neighborhoods. I would knock on doors. I would learn all about sell myself as this college kid that had no painting experience, by the way, or no contracting experience, and learn firsthand, like hiring a marketing team and what it was to hire, staff and things like that. But within the first 3 months, I booked $150,000 worth of work. Whoa. And then I had to produce it. And I ended up being the top manager in Colorado that year. And what it was like the first time for myself where I think a lot of people might be able to resonate with this. It's like, you're capable of a certain degree of success, or you believe you've got this thing inside of you, and you've never quite experienced the external expression or the external validation for that thing. And for me, like knocking on those doors, even though it was like freezing cold some mornings, and convincing the people to let me paint their house allowed me to really look back and be like, holy crap. Yeah, like I can do it. I can actually do a business. And the next year I got asked to come back, and I taught 12 college students how to do what I did the year before, and ended up running a $400,000 company that year. And business kind of kept going from there. But it really was those early years in an industry that I didn't like, mind you. I hated paint. So after the second year, I left painting. I was like, painting's not for me. But what I did learn was all the things that go into running a business. And it's an invitation for anyone that might be listening that sometimes your first experience or learning opportunities aren't the sexiest. And doing them sometimes is what's going to give you the hard skills to actually know what you need, so then you can start more fulfilling companies later, like is what I did with the feather thing. So.
Yeah, you're right. Like I think a lot of people will resonate that. And something that you said now is like, you learn the skills from the first sort of unsexy job. That doesn't have to be like, another thing you can think is, if you're in that unsexy position, whether that's your own business or, working in a corporate job, like a 9-to-5, just the fact that like, it's not forever, this is not permanent, but it's like a stepping stone to something else. So that's really cool that you touched on that. Something that I want to ask you is, you were like really early 20s teaching people how to start and run a business. Did you ever face criticism from people outside, but also maybe like a voice inside saying like, who am I to be teaching people how to run a business at such a young age?
Yeah, great question. So being like a young 19-year-old woman, especially,
sorry, not even in your 20s.
Yeah, I was 19. And most of the people that I was teaching how to do this were actually older than me. Like, not many sophomores in college or freshmen in college are like, hey, let me like wake up at 6 a.m. and knock on doors and take my whole summer and paint houses. It like wasn't sexy. And I was something I was willing to do. And so a lot of people were older than me for sure. And obviously my clients were way older. They were homeowners. And so externally, absolutely. And what I found though is that the more I allowed myself to believe that I deserved it, that I was worth it, that I knew it, even if I was learning it and making it up as I went along, the more comfortable I was with myself, essentially, the more other people came comfortable with me. And there was definitely moments where I was like, kind of felt like I was totally in over my head. I remember one time I was producing like 13 different job sites across all of the managers, and like everything was going wrong. And I was just hands up in the air, covered in paint. Like, what am I, like, how am I, and someone's like, how do we like take the overspray off this fence and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I don't know. And so, yeah. So, I mean, with myself, absolutely. It was really confronting. And I find most of the times in business, I've had to keep stretching. I mean, even the last, 5 weeks, I launched this retreat for 30 entrepreneurs in Bali to uplevel every area of your life. And that came out of a dream. And even just putting that on, I was still end up being stretched. And so I think that in terms of looking at like, how did other people view me at a young age, or even myself? Yeah, it absolutely was uncomfortable, and it still is uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're willing to sit with the uncomfortableness, not try to change it or fix it, but just allow it and be with it, that creates this like solidity in your being and the shift that other people will just start relating to you differently because you feel solid with yourself. So the best thing I can say about that is just to kind of allow it and be with it, because it always gets yummy. And the best, like, once you sit with it too, you always pop out on the other side, and it ends up being awesome. So
yeah, I did a 10-day silent meditation course, and it was that same sort of thing. Like you get all these sort of thoughts, but they teach you like again and again, just come back to your focus point. So it's the same sort of thing. And it's so cool because I've interviewed people of all different ages and walks of life and whatever, and they all say the same thing. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are, you still get these voices like, why am I doing this? Am I good enough to be doing this? What are people going to think of me? But I've found like the people that have really made a success are the ones that are like, screw it. Let people think what they think, and I'm just going to do this anyway. And like, that's the external. And then the internal, it's just like, oh, well, I've got this voice of doubt again. Let's see where this goes. And you just keep pushing on. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So once you'd started your own business, you mentioned a publishing company and working with some really big names like Dave Asprey and Mind Valley. And I want to know, like, also, again, every single question I'm asking seems to be like at such a young age, but how do you land jobs and like connect with influences and opportunities like this, where it feels like, why would they want to work with someone as young or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think the first thing is to never take yourself too seriously. And that is one thing that I really learned for myself. And how I met the guy, the co-founder that I started a company with, we actually met at a bar in Breckenridge, and his friend was hitting on my friend, and we were both trying to be good wings for our like respective friends. So we ended up talking, and we, we're hitting it off in this like ski town, and he was like, hey, like, it seems like you're up to some cool stuff. And I was like, yeah, it seems like you're up to some cool stuff. And he invited me to come by his office the next day. And at the time, what it was he was like, hey, I'm just leaving this other thing I'm doing. I've got this idea to start this publishing company, but there's no money involved with it right now. We're just like starting. And I really need someone to help me like sell the rest of my ski season stuff on Craigslist. Like, do you think you could help with that? So here I was, like, I just left this feather company. I had all this like skill set, right? And he was like, hey, I need someone to help me like sell stuff on Craigslist for free. So also not sexy. However, what I knew was that the opportunity to create this thing was really large and really potent. And if I was willing to add a lot of value up front to him, and at that moment, it just like looks like helping him sell his stuff on Craigslist, then I would be able to show him that, hey, like, it's worth, like, let me show you what I can do. Let me show you how I can get things done, and that I'm willing to be a team player. And so I spent about a month just kind of doing like administrative unsexy things in working together. And that built this foundation of trust where when everything was ready to go with the publishing idea and he had untangled the stuff from his other venture, I was top of mind, like front and center. And so I think that connecting with influencers, often the way that I think why I've been able to land like the Forbes deal, writing for Forbes and the UN and all these other things, is that I listen really, really well. And I ask questions. And I look at who that person is and really ask them, like, what would make this a win-win for you? What would be a super hell yes for you? If you could imagine like a few weeks from now, reflecting back on our time spent, like what would be that like, yeah, that super win? And in asking questions like that, you get to understand what people need and what they're looking for. And for me, I love hearing what people are needing or wanting and making it happen without even telling them I'm going to make it happen. It's like surprising. So it's like, you never really like I said, take yourself too seriously, but you start sprinkling these value surprises all over the place in your network. And after a while, people start to know and respect you that way, and you stand out. Because frankly, most people don't listen. They try to push their agenda ahead from the get-go. They try to share what they're up to. And I don't know about you, but I mean, most of the times when I've like really wanted to create a cool joint venture or a cool partnership with an influencer, and I've like wanted them to like help me promote something, and I'm like going to tell them what it is, you can get really nervous because there's a lot at stake. Like, what if they don't like you? And what if, they say no? And what if it comes out wrong? And the energy just feels like really weird and wonky, I found. So that when you actually, instead of that, look to add value to these people, make them your friends, they're kind of become this like infinite resource, so that when it is time for you, like I'm going to be doing this big launch in January, you've got a whole team of players already on your sideline, ready to go. And so I would say that publishing company was just a direct example of learning that early on, was looking to add a ton of value up front and be willing to like roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty and know that, you might not see the immediate connection in this thing in this moment, but know that it means something to another person. And when you can, take care of another person, they want to take care of you in return.
Yeah. And it's kind of like the same way. I've spoken to one of my guests, Craig Wilkinson, who's kind of like one of my mentors. And we spoke on that episode about like, it's the same way as getting a mentor. It's, reaching out to people and saying like, how can I help? Like, what can I do? And building relationships with people before you need something from them. And social media makes this so easy today. So there's really no excuse not to be doing it. So yeah, I really love that you mentioned that too. Back to the bar. How were your wing womaning skills?
Well, we were all out till 3 a.m. that night. And we literally had to send the boys home. I was like, and at the time I was actually in another relationship too. So it was really like, yeah, it was fun. It was definitely fun. Yeah. My friend and his friend ended up dating actually for several months. So I think it was a success.
Yeah. Well, a win-win. You got a business deal and she got a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Jules, so I mean, you've done some really cool things in your career, but you're not just like a nerdy business person and nothing else. Like you're also really into music and yoga and playing pool and snowboarding, which I think is so cool. So for people listening to this, and I've asked this to a couple of guests before, but how do you balance having so many different passions and interests?
Yeah, it's a great question. The word multi-passionate totally fits, and you touched on several of them. And the way that I view it is I like to follow my highest excitement. And so whatever that thing is that's calling me in the moment. And actually coming back to that, business partner embezzlement story, after sitting in 9 months of kind of untangling all of that, what I decided to do at this like rock bottom place was really take some time off. And so I created this game where for 2 months, all I would do, I would say no to every opportunity. And I just wanted to heal and feel. And what that looked like was a lot of crying, a lot of playing my ukulele and turning inward and doing some self-work and reflection, which at the time, like all of the success that I'd had until that point in my life was very much driven from my head. And anyone that's listening that can resonate with being like a super heady person where you're living in your head and your thoughts all the time, like that was my reality, like concept of living in my body, checking in on a hell yes, following my gut, my intuition, like that was not online for me. Like that was not available to me.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah.
Brian
And
raises his
so
hand.
yeah, totally. And so in those few months after that, in the game that I played, and if anyone's going through a transition, I highly recommend creating context around a game like this, where you tell everyone in your life, hey, for the next 60 days, I'm just going to be a no to everything. Don't take it personally. And my only objection was to heal and feel and to start to cultivate that like internal muscle of listening. But after that game, what came out at the other side of that wasn't me wanting to start another company. What it was me actually wanting to like tap more into my music. And so I got really curious about what it would take to end this struggling artist conversation and combine the realm of an artist and entrepreneur together. And so that launched me creating a YouTube channel and hosting webinars in the music industry and doing all these other things. And I share that mostly is like that was my highest excitement in the moment. And I followed that all the way through. And I used to pro snowboard for a little bit, and that was my highest excitement. And so I like to look at stuff not necessarily in the way of like I'm going full time in business. Like right now, my business is kind of more of my highest excitement, where I'm spending a lot more time here. But that feels really good. And so when I look at it kind of like a game where there's no significance and where I can just play without attachment to any of it, no like significance of like, oh, I'm not going to the gym enough, or oh, I'm not singing enough, or oh, I'm not getting on the pool table enough. It's kind of like, okay, in this moment, this is what I'm wanting to do. It allows me to have more freedom. And when there isn't significance, I find you end up creating balance more just in the nature of it organically. Like right now, I'm working out like 6 days a week, teaching yoga, doing CrossFit, still making my songs, doing business stuff. And I don't feel like heavy or significant about any of it. But there's been times in my life where, yeah, I felt like completely unbalanced and I've made myself super wrong for wanting to do more business or wanting to do more music. And I find when you get in that negative thought trap of like, oh, you should be doing something, or it's like the should game.
The shooting yourself, yeah.
Yeah, the shooting yourself. Literally, it actually is what, can hold you back from having those passions or the multi-passionate stuff seems so available to you. So when there's freedom to choose, I find the passions kind of naturally integrate themselves in the right ratios. And when there's significance or the shoulds, that's actually when it can feel really contracted and really hard to figure it out.
Yeah. So not feeling guilty about, or like not turning those passions into chores. Like I need to go to gym today, or I need to draw an illustration today. But just like sort of tapping into what do I really feel like doing right now. I want to drill down a little bit more into the 60-day game, the heal and feel. So what does that actually look like? Like you said, you said no to everything, but were you literally turning down like all opportunities? Like what does that 60 days actually look like?
Yeah, great question. So at that moment, I had no money, no boyfriend, everything that I thought was important, which was all really awesome. Talk about being invigorated. And what I love about the quarter life crisis is like you think you hit rock bottom, and then it's just like the layers keep going if you're willing to really let them. But the game, and I've actually worked with this game. I've had several clients that I've coached them through this game as a result because it's so effective and so potent. And so if you're interested in setting it up, the first thing I would recommend is getting clear on a container or a context for exactly what the game is. And it could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but it has a definitive start date and a definitive end date. And the whole purpose of this is really just to give yourself space. Because what I found for me is who I was in the moment when I started the game was completely different than who I was at the end of the game. And as a result, the types of opportunities that I was naturally attracting were going to be different. And so to get into like concept of energy for just a moment, and if this loses some people, I apologize. But at the moment of when I started the game, like my energetic vibration, for example, was like really closed, in a lot of ways like broken. And I was like needing to heal. And so the opportunities that I were getting weren't in my highest alignment of the stuff I wanted to be doing. It would be stuff that I could do to make money, or stuff that, seemed like it would be awesome, but it really wasn't a true fit. And it was only at the other side that stuff that was in my highest alignment did start showing up. So what I figured was essentially I was willing to go through this transformation and knew that in that 60-day time period, the opportunities I was going to attract would only be reflective to who I was in that moment. And if I wanted to find the opportunities that were super hell yes, alignment for me, like I was willing to say no to everything. And if it really was worthwhile, it would still be there at the end of the game. If it really was meant to be, I had trust that it would still be there. So that was kind of the premise. And how it looked in reality was I told mostly everyone at that time. I had 3 other companies that I had started to try to pay off all the debt in addition to the publishing company. And I shut them all down. You don't have to go quite as drastic, but I told a few people in my life, like my parents and some key business partners, and I was like, hey, for the next 60 days, I'm just not going to be responding to certain things. And I'm going to be a no to any opportunities that come my way. And what's funny is that when you're no to things, more things come. And so the more that I said no, the more opportunities would present themselves. And I just still kept saying no. And I had trust in that. And my focus during saying no was I really wanted to listen and respond from my body instead of from my mind. So I wanted to make decisions from my heart and from my gut instead of from my head, which I did not know how to do. So I figured that in order to do that, what a friend told me was that, you'll get presented an opportunity and you'll instantly know if it's a hell yes or not. And if it's a hell yes, then it's a no. And I'm like, well, that's great advice, but I can't hear a hell yes worth shit. So I don't know how to exercise this skill. And so I knew that I was going to stumble, and I knew it was going to be awkward, and I knew it was going to be like a little kid learning how to ride a bike for the first time. You've got training wheels. So I thought if I had 60 days, someone could ask me something so simple as like, hey, do you want to come out for dinner tonight? And I would feel into my body. And if I couldn't get a clear read, it was automatically a no. And that was kind of the rule of thumb. Now, frankly, it was the only rule of thumb of that game, was to have someone create an invitation, me feel into how I felt. Was it an instant hell yes? Was it not a clear read? Or was it just a no? And I would make decisions from that place. And that was really the only objective.
That is so
And yeah. And what came out of that was I slowly took the training wheels off and I slowly got on my bike and, started to go a few hundred feet, and then I would stumble and fall, and then, it'd be going further and further each time. But that cultivating that skill is hands down what has helped me since then. That was, the end of 2014, create a life of alignment, success, and really just fun in a way that I never had available to me in any of the successes before. And if it took losing all of my personal savings and going through some hell to have that, then hell yeah, I'd do it again and again, because it was so worth it to have this new skill set.
Yeah, and people might be listening and thinking yeah, but 60 days is really long. But in the grander scheme of things, if you're setting yourself up for a sort of a more happy, successful life, 60 days is nothing.
Totally.
People go on holiday for longer than that. Jules, now on this sort of, I'm going to call it the FOMO buster, because that's actually what it sounds like to me. In this period of 60 or 30 or 60 or 90 days, are you doing a social media or a digital detox at all? Or how does that fit into it all?
Yeah. So I didn't, but I personally, my relationship to social media isn't super obsessive, if you will.
Yeah,
I'm on social media a lot, but it's not like it makes or breaks me. And I think for yourself, it's really something you should feel into. But what I will say is that coming back to the game too is, it doesn't even have to be 30 or 60 days. I've had some clients take this on for just a week, and you don't have to shut down everything, board it up, say no, make it massive. You can literally even try it, frankly, even for 24 hours. And just tell everyone for 24 hours that you're not going to answer them right away because you're just trying to exercise the skill.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
That's an invitation too. And with the social media, I think more than anything, if social media tends to give you a lot of opportunities and a lot of distractions, then maybe it's worthwhile to do the digital detox. And if you're someone like me where it's it exists, but it's not as loud as some of the other things, it didn't make a difference for me either way. So.
Cool. Jules, something else that we have in common is that we're both podcast hosts. So I wonder if you could just share about a bit about what your podcast is all about and the message that you spread on there.
Yeah, I love that. So it's called Unconventional Life. So for anyone that's listening, you can just go to iTunes and look up Unconventional Life. And it's hosted on the Forbes Under 30 channel. And it's all about millennials who earn their living in non-traditional ways. And it was quite funny. It was January of this past year, and I had said to my boyfriend, I was like, I really want to start writing for Forbes. And no joke, a week later, an email comes in from Forbes. And they were like, hey, do you want to start writing for us? And I was like, well, I might be interested, but I actually really want to do this podcast. And it's called Unconventional Life. And they're like, why don't you make it the official podcast of the Forbes Under 30 channel? And when they said yes to that, I was like, holy crap.
That
all right.
So cool.
So it launched this past March, and it's aired on the Forbes Under 30 channel. And what that means is that I write, I do the show, and then I take the audio and embed it into the Forbes article. So if you're someone that loves to listen, you can actually just put Jules Schroeder, Forbes, or unconventionallifeshow.com, and you can actually read kind of the article in addition to hearing the podcast.
So it's kind of like the show notes.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, the show notes, but in the form of like digestible Forbes articles. Okay. So yeah, you can check any of that out. And I always love to tell more interesting stories. And so if you feel like you have got an unconventional story and it's worthwhile, feel free to, send me a note at jules@unconventionallifeshow.com.
That's really cool. And what is some of let's say like 1 to 3 of some of the most unconventional ways you've seen people making livings for themselves?
So the first one comes to mind is my friend Michael Grab. He actually is a stone balancer. So he takes rocks in the creek and he balances them into rock sculptures. He gets flown to places all over the world, like the World Economic Forum, these crazy places. He gets paid $5,000 for a 7-minute performance stacking rocks in front of like really successful businessmen. Yeah. And so, and I watched him. Yeah, and I watched him. He actually is from Boulder, and I knew him like from like 7 years ago when he was like kind of doing some kind of drug trip, and that's how it started. And to watch him go from that into like this, it's been wild. So his business model, super unconventional. Some of the other ones, a video game developer for social causes, Arad Malhotra, he was on Forbes 30 Under 30. He basically uses video games as a tool to promote social causes. So someone that is like women's rights or clean water, he turns those concepts into a video game. And so you can learn about the cause playing a video game, which is super awesome.
That is so cool.
And yeah, people are doing all kinds of wild stuff. And the last one is this guy who does museum tours. It's called Museum Hacks. And they hire circus performers and all kinds of like actors to basically take you on these tours of popular museums like the Museum of Natural History or the Guggenheim Museum. And they make it fun and they get all the gossip behind the pieces of art, like how much the museum paid for it, how many times it was stolen, if anyone had like thrown up on the museum or like any weird fact. And they reveal all of that too. And they don't talk about the art or like any of the other stuff. They just share the gossip. And so he's blown up doing that. But yeah, a lot of fun business models. And then, of course, we've got the entrepreneurs and the Olympians and other people like that. But yeah. The more unconventional, better.
So what's your advice for people who have like maybe not a rock stacker, but people who have like a different idea for how they want their lives to go, but facing pressure from friends and family to kind of conform to society and convention?
Yeah, so that a lot of guests on my show, that's up for them as well. And I think the thing about friends and family and pressure is that that's always going to be there. And one thing I've at least learned in my own life is that the more pressure I get from someone, like my dad even, I had started, even after I had launched that publishing company, he was still like, so Jules, when are you going to get a job? Like, are you just going to like be an entrepreneur for your life? Like, are you like, when are you going to do this? And I'm the oldest. And so really we went like at it. Like we had several brawls around it. And I was like, Dad, I'm not going to be going a job. And what I've realized is that people in your life that put pressure on you or that tell you you can't do it or that, tell you to think about it before jumping in. One, they usually have their best interest in heart. But two, I find why they're so triggered about you wanting to jump in, it reminds them about a part of themselves that they haven't loved, accepted, honored, or given attention to. And watching you jump in and do that is really confronting for them. And so if you can just allow them to have their own experience, not make it about you, as much as it's hard to try to tease that out, because of course you want the approval of your friends and family, but know that it's their stuff and it's their internal work and their process to heal that thing about themselves. And that's why you're so triggered. Because frankly, if you're like feeling totally awesome and that, isn't triggering for you, you won't have that projection out to someone else. And a super quick example is like, let's say you're in the best shape of your life and someone on the street walks by and is like, hey man, like you need to lose some weight. You look at that person and you'd be like, you're crazy. Like, I feel awesome. But if you, are struggling with your body and someone makes a comment about your weight, it's going to hit home with you and it's going to make you feel shitty because there's a part of yourself that you haven't loved, honored, or accepted. And so the same thing with like the naysayers or the people that put pressure on you to stay in a job or get this income first. It's usually because there's a part of themselves that you're mirroring and it's a little painful, and it's way easier to point the finger at you and tell you not to do it than it is to point the finger back at themselves. So love those people, give them compassion where they're at. Don't make them wrong for their process. They're totally in their own journey. And for you, like you're the one really in the driver's seat and there are a million and one ways to make money at it. And so if you can love those people up where they're at and love yourself where you're at, it can take away kind of that significance once again and give you access to kind of step into the game. I think once you tell yourself that you're in the game, like the how-tos of how to make it happen, those details can fall into place. I mean, just listen to my podcast. You'll get a million and one how-tos on how to actually become an entrepreneur. But that mindset in and of itself, I would start there.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to, again, like getting really sort of honing in on your gut feel and what your body is saying, and like figuring out what's true for you and not what other people are saying. And of course, then, Jules, Unconventional Life is not just a podcast, but you're actually building a bit of a community around it. So why don't you share a bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So, like I was saying momentarily earlier, I had this dream 5 weeks ago, and the first word out of my mouth was Bali. And I saw 30 entrepreneurs coming together and up-leveling every area of their life. And literally in the last 5 weeks, we've filled 29 of our 30 spots, which has been crazy. So now we're going to Bali for this retreat next month, in November. And what sparked out of that was this idea of like, wow, this podcast, like the people that are writing in, it's so much more than just the show. And so we've built out our Facebook page, which you can facebook.com/unconventional life show. And we're turning it into this platform where we're actually going to be opening up applications soon for contributors, where you'll be able to contribute content, videos, inspirational quotes, pictures, stories, and be one of our contributors. And we'll be able to feature you on the Unconventional Life content platform, which is super exciting because obviously we've got, the Forbes background and a bunch of other huge influencers. And so that'll be launching within the next upcoming weeks. So for those that are listening, you can head over to unconventionallifeshow.com or check out our Facebook page and learn more about how to become a contributor. But it'll be a giant hub for inspiration in a way if, you want to write or you've got content you want to share, a really good platform for you to get exposure on and start building your own brand. So
yeah, I'm going to definitely check that out myself, and we'll put a link to all the stuff we mentioned in the show notes. Jules, I do want to be mindful of the time, but I've got a couple questions I want to sort of fire through at the end here. The first is, what do you wish you'd been told earlier in your 20s?
Earlier in my 20s, I wish I had been told that it doesn't have to be hard. Like all the times that I've gone through something and it's been really challenging, like really like struggling, internal challenge. I mean, not external, internal challenge. It's usually been not the right opportunity for me. And I've tried so hard to make it be the right opportunity, and it's usually not. And one thing that I've learned now is that when something internally, I'm struggling with it and it feels challenging, it's usually an indicator that it's not the right thing. And when something just seamlessly falls into place like dominoes, that's usually where you're meant to focus your time.
Cool. What's the greatest opportunity for quarter lifers today?
Oh, so good. I would say the greatest opportunity would be to build your own website for sure. Learn WordPress, in my opinion. I build all my websites. You can check out julesschroeder.com, any of the websites. I've learned how to build them all. It doesn't take long. Google will be your best friend.
Yeah.
And if you can seriously build your own website, it can be a one-page site. I mean, you could even skip all of WordPress and go to Squarespace and put it up. It's allowing yourself to basically live as a brand. It's like having your phone number in a phone book for 2016. And it allows you yeah, it just shows people that you're available and you're open. And who knows what's going to be on your website. You don't need to have that be super clear. Everyone says, oh, know your offer, know your this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, just like put your phone number in the phone book or put your web page online. And you'll be surprised what organically will start to come your way.
Yeah,
opportunity wise.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, this next question is a little bit of a sort of a meta question. What would I need to ask you for this to become the most important thing for 20-somethings to hear? And then how would you answer that?
It's a good question. Okay, so you would need to ask me what do you think the key is to finding success, sustainable success? I think would be the question.
I like that. Do share.
And I would say it comes down to being really committed and totally unattached to the form and the expression in which something shows up. So when I said, hey, I want to start writing for Forbes to my boyfriend, I had no attachment to what was going to happen. What I didn't do was email 30 editors and tell them I wanted to start writing for Forbes and get out there and start like making it happen and hustle, hustle, hustle. I simply put out a commitment. I was totally unattached to how it showed up. And it came back to me within a week. And that was like rapid fire implementation. And it's not always going to be like that easy. But I find that when you are very specific, I wasn't like, oh, I want to start a blog or I want to start writing. I said specifically, I want to start writing for Forbes. That was my commitment I was standing for with no attachment. It showed up. And, when I launched my thing, Create You, which is this higher education initiative, I literally had said, I was like, I want to get into higher education. This woman that I was consulting with tells me she's working for the UN. In the moment, I'm like, I'm doing something in education called Create You. And she's like, can you be at the UN in 3 weeks? Totally unattached to any of that showing up and just having a commitment of oh, I'm standing for this thing. And so what I would recommend, the most important thing for, quarter lifers or 20-somethings to hear is be very specific with the things that you want. Speak them over and over and over again in your network with zero attachment to the form and the time and the when it will show up. And what I find is the more that you practice that, the faster things will start appearing. So the more that you cultivate that practice, you'll literally say stuff and it'll appear. Literally, it was Friday afternoon 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I want a DJ for my live event who'll be an attendee. 4 hours later, this beautiful DJ applies. It was like magic. And that magic is accessible to everyone. It's just cultivating that practice.
Yeah, I've experienced the exact same thing myself, especially in the last couple of months, in terms of my debt and living arrangements and work and finding clients, and it's just really the universe has been really showing off, and it kind of echoes, and I've shared this quote in so many episodes of my podcast now, but I've got it up in my office in a frame by Jim Carrey, where he said, as far as I can tell, it's just about letting the universe know what you want and working towards it while letting go of how it comes to pass. It's really I've experienced that myself, and it's so cool to hear someone else sharing the same thing. Jules, I have one more question. Before I get to that, what's the best way for people listening to get in touch with you and find out more about the work you're doing?
Yeah, so the best way is to go over to Facebook to Unconventional Life Show, facebook.com/Unconventional Life Show. You can find out all the details about the website, the podcast, my email, and feel free to just connect with me there. Send me a message. I love hearing more fun stories. And you can also check out Jules Schroeder, SCHROEDERJULES, JulesSchroeder.com, and learn more about what we're up to there as well. So.
Cool. And I'll link to all of those good spots in the show notes. Before I get to the final question, Jules, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you for coming on the show today and sharing a bit about your story and your wisdom you've picked up in the last sort of decade. And the fact that you're still doing those things that light you up, like your music and yoga and snowboarding and pool. I think it's really cool that you're not only creating a life of success and happiness, but a life that makes you that brings you joy as well. And I really just want to acknowledge you for being authentic in that way and for sharing what you're doing with other people. The final question that I have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
Well, thank you, Brian, for that acknowledgement. I think it's always a privilege to be able to share your story. And so thank you for creating the opportunity for that. And to answer the question, the one thing quarter lifers can do this week, I would say you could start being responsible for the networks of conversations that exist around you. And what I mean by that is that people talk about stuff around you. And let's say you've got a repeating thing where everyone in your life always talks about how they don't have enough money. Like your parents talk about how they don't have enough money. Your friends talk about how they don't have enough money. You hear people like in the grocery store fighting about how they don't have enough money. Consider that all of those conversations all are orbiting around you, and you're actually in control of those conversations. Like you're at the epicenter of them, of the networks of those conversations, and you have the power to infiltrate something completely new into your network. Like you could totally infiltrate, wow, money is so abundant. How am I going to find all this way to spend it? Or like, wow, man, I have so much time. And just start to notice, like putting ideas out there. You know, like it could be something very concrete, like, oh, I'm just like writing this new blog and I'm going to have it launched in the next 2 weeks or whatever it is. Let that orbit all the conversations that exist around you and just start paying attention to the things that people in your life talk about. People in your immediate circles, people in your outward circles, and random people that you meet. And just as a game for curiosity, take it on that you're responsible for all of it. And just as you're responsible for the things that you like, you're also responsible for the things that you don't like. And play with just introducing new conversations into your network of conversations and see what shows up. And it's kind of a fun game. And in my own life, I found that's what's given me like the power to really create these massive connections, is that I consider that I'm responsible for all of the things that are happening. So take it on as a game. Don't get heavy and significant with it and try it out and see what results come back. And I'd love to hear anyone that takes it on as a game. Feel free to email me and tell me about your results. Because if you really start taking this on religiously, a lot of stuff will open up for you really quickly.
I love it. I love it so much. Jules, like I said earlier, you've fast become one of my favorite people, and I'm sure we're going to be in touch well into the future. But just from my side again, and I'm sure from everyone listening, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback today.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up this week's episode of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast, episode 34. And a big thanks once again to Jules Schroeder for coming on the show, sharing a bit of her story and giving us some of her wisdom as well. If you liked this one, make sure you share it with your friends on social media. And please shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier to let me know some of your biggest takeaways. For me, the biggest thing that stood out was when we say no to things, more and better opportunities show up, which more align with what we are trying to create in our lives. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this show at briantier.com/034. And to get all these episodes as soon as they come out, plus stuff I only share with subscribers, please head on over to quarterlifecomeback.com, fill in your details on that page, and you'll join the sort of special insiders list. Thanks once again for spending time with me this week. And until next time, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.